Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I think some of the speeches yesterday will have shown that we are in the presence of foodies. There are people in this group who love food and who like cooking and who like eating. I am a bit of a foodie myself, and sometimes when I go to the shops, little things strike me and I wonder why they are the way they are. For example, why is it that in the supermarket you can buy Parmesan and then you can buy something called vegetarian Parmesan style cheese? I mean, what is that and why is it not Parmesan? Or why can you buy feta and then things that are called salad cheese or Yorkshire fine fettle cheese, which looks exactly like feta and tastes quite a lot like feta but isn't feta? And the answer is that some of these products enjoy special protection under European law, under a regime of protected designations of origin and protected geographical indications. And it's a lot easier if I abbreviate all that to PDOs and PGIs. These are governed by an EU regulation, the code of which is 1151/2012. But the system itself was actually introduced in 1993. And in case you're wondering what PDOs and PGIs are, a PDO is granted to a product that is made according to a traditional recipe in a particular geographical area and with ingredients from that area. And the difference between the PDO and the PGI is that the PGI also comes from a specific region, is also made to a traditional recipe, but the ingredients can come from further afield. The PGI has a blue and yellow symbol here, and the PDO has a red and yellow symbol. Now, so far I've quoted foreign products at you. I've mentioned Parmesan and I've mentioned feta cheese, but the UK, of course, also has some PDOs and PGIs. In fact, there are more than 60 traditional products in this country that enjoy protection under the EU regime. Some of them are more obscure than others, and I will avoid giving you those examples, but others are very well known. For example, Jersey Royal potatoes, the new potatoes that you get that are very little, and they have to come from Jersey, and they have protection under this regime. Stilton cheese needs to be made in a particular region according to a traditional recipe. A particular type of pork pie, Melton Mowbray pork pies, also enjoy protection under this system. And so do Cornish pasties. Until some years ago, apparently, there were a lot of poor quality copies of Cornish pasties, people trying to pass off their pasties as the real genuine article when in fact they were not. And of course, a Cornish pasty now can only be made in Cornwall and has to contain beef, onions, swede, potatoes, and it has to be made with rough puff pastry and no other, and have crimping on the edges. There are many other British products that enjoy either a PDO or a PGI, but actually we are a long way behind our continental cousins in terms of the numbers of products that we have managed to register. Let me give you some comparisons. Italy is the country that has the largest number of PDOs and PGIs, 244 in total. France has 191. You can imagine, of course, quite a few of the French cheeses and also champagne and wines have PDOs and, or PGIs. So between them, Italy and France have more than 40% of the names that are registered. Then comes Spain with 154, and then Portugal, Greece, and then Germany and others. Now, some people have wondered about the disparity in the take-up of PDOs and PGIs and wondered really why it is that it's more southern countries of the EU that have registered more names than the northern countries. And people have put forward various explanations for this phenomenon. One is to do with climate. So people have suggested that because in southern Europe it's hot, you need to get on and process the food and prepare it more quickly and do it locally. And that explains some of the local traditions of food preservation, if you like, that then led to PDOs and PGIs. Another argument is that there's a lot of product specialization in the south. So particular regions that produce olive oil or honey, let's say, and that's been another reason why they have been able to go for PDOs and PGIs, whereas in the north of Europe you don't have such clear specialization between regions. Others have mentioned differing legal and administrative setups as a possible explanation of why there are more PDOs in the south. They have said that there is less of a tradition of protecting food names in the north. And it's certainly clear that the longer you have had some sort of system yourself as a country, the more PDOs and PGIs you have. The newer member states of the EU have very few PDOs and PGIs by comparison with the older member states of the EU. So why is it that agricultural producers try and get their food names registered? What are the advantages? And what are the advantages for consumers? Well, the idea is that you can guarantee authenticity for the consumer, that they're not going to be fooled by pale imitations of the original, and that in fact this could amount to unfair competition because some producers might be making something that doesn't taste as good, that isn't such good quality, that doesn't have such good quality ingredients, and the consumer wouldn't know the difference if there wasn't this system of PDOs and PGIs. Also, PDOs help to preserve traditional recipes. They secure product identity, and they give a strong brand image. And the producers like it because they use it as a marketing tool, and it can help increase their profits. But the PDO-PGI system has also been criticised. It's been criticised on administrative grounds, basically for involving an awful lot of red tape. It's a very lengthy process to get a product registered. In the UK, producers are helped by DEFRA, by the Department for the Environment and Rural Affairs, but it can take up to 9 years, for example, to get one product registered. And there's also been criticism of mismanagement, if you like. I mentioned the case of Stilton earlier. There is one producer in this country that makes Stilton with raw milk, but because the product specification for the PDO says Stilton is made with pasteurized milk, this particular producer's cheese can't use the name Stilton, but he says that the real authentic traditional recipe for Stilton always used raw milk, and it's only because of concerns about consumer health and safety, blah blah blah, that they're using pasteurized milk now, but authentically speaking it should be raw milk, and he's making it properly, but he can't use the name Stilton. So that's another criticism of the system. And a final criticism is that it is simply protectionism, blatant protectionism. It's very good for the producers who are inside, but it's very bad for the producers who are left out in the cold. And it basically favours long-standing producers, people who've been doing it for many years. So it doesn't favour newcomers on the market or innovation. So much for how the system works. Now a few words about what the contribution of this system is to the UK's economy. PDO foods contribute £1 billion to the UK economy. So they're actually quite important in financial terms. And in the EU in general, PDO foods contribute £15.8 billion. It's not just about the value of the products that are made, though. There are other side effects of having PDOs and PGIs. So there's an effect on regional economies. For example, the market for Melton Mowbray pork pies is worth £50 million, or the market for Stilton is worth £50 to £60 million. But it also has a knock-on effect in terms of local food tourism. For example, people might visit Bakewell in the Peak District to buy a Bakewell pudding or something, or they might actually go to Stilton or to Anglesey to buy Anglesey sea salt, let's say. And it also has an impact on local jobs, because if producers can make more and sell more thanks to the PDO, then they can also employ more people. So what about Brexit? How might this impact the positive effects of the PDO-PGI system on the UK's economy? Because my first thought here was, well, if the UK isn't a member state of the EU anymore, then it won't be able to use PDOs, it won't be able to label its product with the PDOs and PGIs anymore. So what will happen to Stilton and Jersey Royal potatoes? They'll just become like any other old product. So in that regard, PDOs and PGIs would be a casualty of Brexit. Now, the reality is a little more complex than that. It is possible for the EU to enter into bilateral agreements with third countries regarding the protection of food names. So it might be that the UK could negotiate a bilateral agreement with the EU after Brexit to try and keep some of that protection. For example, the EU has an agreement with New Zealand on wine and PDOs for wine. And the UK, I suppose, would then also have to negotiate bilateral agreements with other countries if they wanted any kind of protection for traditional and regional products. So that would be a very piecemeal approach. It also has to be said that before the PDO system in the EU, the UK had a different type of protection which exists in other countries based on trademark law. So it might be possible to do something along those lines with trademarks, but just off the top of my head as a layman, it seems to me that that would have severe limitations, because you can trademark some things, but you surely can't trademark something like sea salt. It's just too big, it's too generic to be able to enjoy protection from a trademark. So I think the impact of Brexit on the PDO regime is very uncertain. What about the fallout of Brexit on the agricultural sector in general in the UK? Because let's not forget that the food and drink sector is worth £80 billion per year to the UK's economy. It's a very big importer and exporter. It employs 400,000 people. But, little addendum to that, 38% of workers in this sector are foreign born. So what might the impact of Brexit be on the food and drink sector or on agriculture in general in the UK? Well, again, off the top of my head a little, some of the potential consequences I could think of are fewer CAP subsidies. The Common Agricultural Policy is well known for offering subsidies. Farmers in the UK for many years, for example, received subsidies for set-aside land. CAP subsidies would disappear. Would they get the same level of subsidies from the UK government? Question mark. Secondly, almost inevitably, there would be labour problems in the agricultural sector if immigration was curbed. Small technical problem, the lights are going off in the room, so I'm going to ask some of the colleagues to jump about to make the lights go back up. Thank you, brilliant. Let me give you an example of the type of labour problem that could occur. The apple and pear sector might suffer greatly if immigration from Eastern Europe was curbed. Apples and pears are harvested by hand, and there are 12,000 seasonal workers who harvest them every year. Most of them come from Eastern Europe, and the farmers have found it impossible to recruit from the UK. They say that basically Brits don't want to do the job. So Brexit could have a real impact, not just on apples and pears, but I'm thinking also of strawberries, many other branches of agriculture, which relies on seasonal workers from abroad. So that's another problem. Another possible impact of Brexit could be more difficult trade conditions. We would no longer have access to the single market in the same way. There might be a question arising of import duties being imposed, either by the EU for our exports or by us on EU imports. That would increase costs. So that's yet another problem. On the plus side, some people are saying, but we won't be hamstrung by such restrictive legislation from the EU. For example, the EU keeps trying to ban certain pesticides, and we would be able to take our own decisions about that. So the potential impact of Brexit on agriculture is very uncertain. But to conclude, the concern I have is that in an effort to be more competitive and to do well in potentially more difficult trading conditions, the UK would make concessions on environmental standards and on animal welfare standards. And that is something that I consider very undesirable. Thank you.